The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Floating platforms held representatives from 1,000 different worlds. Some had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Others had bodies made of living crystal. A few existed as nothing more than clouds of light. They had gathered here for 300 years to decide the fate of civilizations, and today they would decide the fate of one more. Ambassador Al of the stood at the central platform. His gray skin was smooth like polished stone, and his 4 eyes moved independently as he studied the holographic display before him. The display showed a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. Earth, the humans called it. "The evidence is clear," Al said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber through translation devices that made every species understand. This species developed nuclear weapons before they even left their own atmosphere. They have fought 2 global wars in a single century. They poison their own water and air. They cannot even achieve peace among themselves. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. They had studied humanity for decades. They had watched from hidden observation posts as humans built bombs and tore down forests. They had recorded every war, every act of cruelty, every failure. "I move that the application for membership be," Al continued. "Furthermore, I move that the Sol system be placed under permanent quarantine. No contact, no trade, no assistance of any kind." The vote took less than an hour. 1,047 species voted yes. None voted no. The decision was final. On Earth, Director Amy Collins stood in the operations center of the United Nations Space Agency. She was 53 years old with gray streaks in her brown hair and lines around her eyes from years of staring at screens and stars. Around her stood the best minds humanity had to offer. Commander Marsh, a tall man with broad shoulders and a quiet voice, monitored the communication systems. Lisa Grant, their chief communications officer, sat at her station with headphones pressed to her ears. The message from the Council arrived at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon, Earth Standard Time. Lisa played it on the main screen so everyone could hear. The alien voice was cold and flat. "The Galactic Council has reviewed humanity's application for membership and found it lacking. Your species has demonstrated consistent patterns of violence, environmental destruction, and social instability. You are not ready to join the galactic community. Furthermore, a quarantine zone has been established around your solar system. Any attempt to leave this zone will be met with immediate response. This decision is final. There will be no appeal." The screen went dark. No one in the room spoke for a long moment. Was the first to break the silence. "That's it then. They're just going to leave us here." Amy stared at the blank screen. She had spent 20 years working toward this moment. 20 years of building ships and sending messages and hoping that somewhere out there someone would answer. Someone had answered, and the answer was no. "Director," Lisa said softly, "there's something else you need to see." Amy walked over to Lisa's station. On the smaller screen was a different set of data, something their deep space telescopes had detected 6 months ago, something they had kept secret while they waited for the Council's response. The data showed a massive cluster of asteroids moving through space. Thousands of rocks, some as large as small moons, all traveling together in a cloud of destruction. The trajectory calculations had been run 100 times. The result was always the same. 47 years, Amy said quietly. "That's how long we have." "Join them at the station. We could tell them, the Council. Maybe if they knew about this, they would change their minds." Amy shook her head. "They've been watching us for centuries. If they cared about what happened to us, they would have offered help already. They don't see us as people. They see us as a problem that will eventually solve itself." She was right, and everyone in the room knew it. The galaxy had looked at humanity and decided they weren't worth saving. No technology would be shared. No ships would come to evacuate them. No terraforming equipment would be offered. Earth would face its end alone. Lisa wiped tears from her eyes. "What do we do? Do we tell everyone? Amy considered the question carefully. In 47 years, every man, woman, and child on Earth would die. The oceans would boil. The mountains would crumble. Everything humanity had ever built or dreamed or loved would be erased from the universe as if it had never existed. Some leaders would want to keep it secret. They would say that panic would destroy society faster than any asteroid. Others would want to fight, to build weapons that could never be built in time, to rage against a fate they could not change. But Amy Collins had not spent her life reaching for the stars because she believed humanity was weak. She had done it because she believed they were strong in ways that others could not see. We tell them everything, she said finally. The Council's decision, the asteroids, all of it, and then we get to work. Frowned, work on what? We can't build ships fast enough to evacuate everyone. We can't destroy an asteroid field that size. What exactly are we supposed to do? Amy turned to face her team. These were the people who had dedicated their lives to the dream of reaching other worlds. That dream was dead now, but something else could take its place. We can't save ourselves, she admitted, but we can make sure the universe never forgets us. We can preserve everything we are. Our science, our art, our music, our stories. We can build something that will last long after Earth is gone. Lisa looked up with red eyes. A message in a bottle. More than a message, Amy said. A gift to a galaxy that abandoned us. We're going to show them exactly what they chose to let die. And maybe someday when they find what we left behind, they'll understand what they did. The room was silent again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like the moment before a storm, when the air grows heavy and the world holds its breath. Straightened his shoulders. Where do we start? Amy allowed herself a small smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had accepted a terrible truth and decided to face it standing up. We start by telling the world, and then we build the greatest monument any species has ever created. We have 47 years. Let's not waste a single day. Outside the windows of the operations center, the sun was setting over the ocean. The sky burned orange and red and gold. Somewhere far beyond that sky, the Galactic Council had already forgotten about the small blue planet they had condemned. They would remember eventually. They would remember and wish they could take it all back. But by then it would be far too late for regret. The announcement changed everything. President Caleb addressed the entire world from the steps of the United Nations building. His voice did not shake. His words were clear and simple. He told humanity about the Council's rejection. He told them about the asteroids. He told them they had 47 years. For 3 days the world fell into chaos. People screamed in the streets. Markets crashed. Some prayed. Some wept. Some did terrible things because they believed nothing mattered anymore. But on the 4th day, something remarkable happened. People stopped screaming. They looked around at the destruction they had caused in their panic, and they felt ashamed. They looked at their children and their neighbors and the strangers on the street, and they remembered what it meant to be human. The chaos ended not because leaders demanded order, but because ordinary people chose it. They chose to live their final years with dignity instead of fear. They chose to work together instead of tearing each other apart. Amy Collins watched this transformation from her office window. She had expected the worst from humanity. Instead, she witnessed something that gave her hope, even as she prepared for the end of everything she loved. Within a year, a new global government had formed, not through war or conquest but through agreement. The old borders did not disappear, but they stopped mattering. Resources were shared. Knowledge flowed freely between nations. Scientists who had once worked in secret now collaborated openly. Every hospital, every university, every factory became part of one great effort. Admiral Santos led the military committee. He was a serious man with scars on his hands from decades of service. In another time, he might have planned for war. Now he planned for something different. We need to think about what we want to leave behind, he told the Council of World Leaders. We cannot build enough ships to save everyone. We cannot destroy the asteroids, but we can build something that will survive long after we are gone. Dr. Price presented her plan first. She was a biologist who had spent her life studying endangered species. Now she would study all species. We will collect genetic samples from every living thing on Earth, she explained. Every plant, every animal, every microorganism. We will preserve them so that someday, somewhere, they might live again. Her team worked day and night. They traveled to every corner of the planet, collecting seeds and tissue samples and DNA. They documented everything with photographs and videos and detailed notes. They built freezers that would last for thousands of years without power. They made copies and backups of backups. Engineer Beck led the construction project. He had built bridges and tunnels and skyscrapers. Now he would build the vault, a structure larger than anything humanity had ever attempted. They hollowed out the center of Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The rock there was solid and stable, protected from radiation and impacts. The vault would survive long after Earth was dust. We are building a library, told his workers. The greatest library in history, every book ever written, every song ever sung, every painting ever painted, every discovery ever made, all of it will be preserved here. The workers came from every nation. They worked in shifts around the clock. They knew they would never see the finished product used. They knew they would never walk those halls, but they built it anyway with care and precision because it mattered. Foster led the linguistics team. She was a small woman with glasses and wild curly hair who spoke 17 languages. Her job was perhaps the most important of all. Whatever we leave behind must be understood, she said. If aliens find our vault 1,000,000 years from now, they need to know what they are looking at. She developed a universal translation system. It started with basic mathematics, the language of the universe itself. From there, it built upward to simple concepts, then complex ideas, then full language. She tested it on artificial intelligence programs that had never seen human language before. If they could learn it, so could any alien mind. Years passed. The asteroid cluster grew larger in the sky, visible now even without telescopes. People watched it approach with a strange calm. They had made their peace with death. What they could not accept was being forgotten. In schools, children learned not just reading and writing, but also the importance of what they were building. Teachers explained that their drawings and stories might be seen by beings from distant stars. The children took this very seriously. They put extra care into everything they created, knowing it might outlast them by millions of years. Hospitals continued to care for the sick, even though there was no future to save them for. Doctors worked through the night, not because their patients would survive the coming disaster, but because that was simply what doctors did. They refused to abandon their purpose just because the end was near. Factories that once made weapons now made storage devices. Soldiers who once trained for war now trained for construction work. Artists who once struggled to sell their paintings now worked tirelessly to create masterpieces for the vault. Amy Collins visited the Titan construction site in the 35th year. She was old now, her hair completely white, her steps slow and careful. But her eyes were still sharp, and her mind was still clear. She stood in the central chamber of the vault, a space so large that clouds formed near its ceiling. Around her, workers installed the final panels of a massive display system. When activated, it would show visitors the history of Earth from the first single-celled organisms to the final days of human civilization. "It is beautiful," she said to Beck, who stood beside her. "We did not have enough time to include everything," he replied sadly. "There is so much we had to leave out." Amy shook her head. "We included what matters, our kindness, our curiosity, our refusal to give up even when all hope was lost. That is what they need to understand about us." She thought about the Galactic Council, so far away, so certain that humanity was nothing more than a dangerous mistake. They had not checked on Earth in decades. They had written off an entire species and moved on to other concerns. Someday they would learn the truth. Someday they would open this vault and see what humanity had built in its final years. They would read the stories and hear the music and understand the science. And they would realize, far too late, that they had been wrong about everything. "Make sure the final message is ready," Amy told Foster. "I want to record it myself." Nodded. "We have prepared a special chamber. The acoustics are perfect. Your words will sound just as clear a million years from now as they do today." Amy smiled. It was time to say goodbye to the galaxy. Not with anger or hatred, but with something far more powerful, with truth, with grace, with the unshakable dignity of a species that refused to be broken, even by extinction itself. The asteroids filled half the sky now. They moved slowly, almost peacefully, like a river of stone flowing through the darkness of space. Scientists had tracked each one, named each one, calculated exactly when each one would strike. The first impacts would begin in 12 hours. The last ones would finish the job 3 days later. Commander Cole stood at the observation window of the Mars orbital station. He was 42 years old, with tired eyes and steady hands. Behind him, the final crew of humanity's last outpost prepared the transmission equipment. Dr. Torres checked the power systems for the 100th time. Communications specialist Peter Grant calibrated the array that would broadcast across every known frequency in the galaxy. "Signal is ready," Peter announced. "We can reach every system in the Council's territory, maybe further." Nodded but did not turn from the window. He could see Earth from here, a tiny blue dot against the black. In a few hours, that dot would change color. Then it would disappear entirely. "Have the evacuation ships departed?" he asked. Hesitated before answering. "There were no evacuation ships, Commander, you know that." He did know that. There had never been enough ships, enough fuel, enough time. A few thousand people had made it to the Mars colonies and the bases on Titan. They might survive another generation, maybe 2, before their supplies ran out. But the 8 billion people on Earth had nowhere to go. They had chosen to stay together. They had chosen to face the end as a family. Down on the surface of Earth, the final day began like any other. The sun rose over the Pacific Ocean and moved westward across continents that had stood for billions of years. People woke up, ate breakfast, hugged their children. Some went to work out of habit. Others simply sat with their loved ones and waited. In New York City, a man named Ben walked to his school even though classes had been canceled. He had been a teacher for 30 years. He sat at his desk and wrote letters to his students, telling them how proud he was of each one. He left the letters on their desks, even though no one would ever read them. In a hospital in Chicago, Dr. Sophie Lane made her rounds as she always did. Her patients could not be cured. They could not be saved. But she checked on each one anyway, adjusting pillows and offering kind words. When a young nurse asked her why she bothered, Sophie simply said, "Because they are still here. And so am I." In a small town in Kansas, a little girl named Grace sat on her porch with her mother. She was 8 years old, with red hair and freckles and a gap where her front teeth used to be. She watched the sky, which was growing darker even though it was the middle of the day. "Mom," she said, "are the aliens bad?" Her mother stroked her hair gently. "No, sweetheart, I do not think they are bad. I think they are just scared." "Scared of what?" "Of things they do not understand, of people who are different from them." Grace thought about this for a moment. "I hope they are not scared anymore someday." On Mars, the time had come. Cole took his position at the center of the broadcast chamber. The cameras focused on him, but he would not be delivering the message. That honor belonged to someone else. The screen behind him flickered to life, showing a recorded image of Amy Collins. She had filmed this message 3 years ago, just before she died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 91. She had wanted to be the one to speak for humanity, and no one had argued. Her face filled the screen, old and weathered but calm. Her voice was strong despite her age. "To the Galactic Council and all species who receive this message," she began. "My name is Amy Collins. I was the director of Humanity's space program when you rejected our application for membership. I was there when you declared us too dangerous to be trusted. I was there when you drew a line around our solar system and left us to our fate." She paused, and in that pause was the weight of everything humanity had lost. "I am recording this message because in a few years our world will be destroyed. A cluster of asteroids that we detected long ago will strike our planet and end all life. We asked for your help. We asked for technology to save ourselves. We asked for ships to carry our children to safety. You said no." Another pause, watched the faces of his crew. Tears ran down their cheeks, but no one looked away. "I want you to understand something," Amy continued. "We do not hate you. We do not curse your names. We understand that fear drives many decisions and that trust must be earned. Perhaps if we had more time, we could have shown you who we really are." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes seeming to look directly at whoever would watch this recording in the distant future. "But we did not have more time, so instead we built something for you. On Titan you will find everything we were. Our history, our science, our art, our music, our dreams. We leave it freely to anyone who wishes to learn. There are no conditions, there are no demands. It is simply a gift." Her voice softened but did not weaken. "We could have spent our final years in despair. We could have raged against the darkness. Instead, we chose to create. We chose to love. We chose to hope that someday someone would find what we left behind and understand." She sat back in her chair. "Remember us not as the species you feared. Remember us as the species you never truly knew. We were capable of great violence, yes, but we were also capable of great kindness. We built bombs, but we also built hospitals. We fought wars, but we also raised children. We made terrible mistakes, but we never stopped trying to be better." The final words came slowly, each one carefully chosen. "This is Earth's last message to the stars. We were here, we mattered, and when the end came we faced it standing up. Goodbye." The recording ended, the screen went dark. Cole pressed the button that sent the transmission out into the void. The message raced away at the speed of light, spreading in all directions, reaching toward distant stars that would not receive it for years or decades or centuries. On Earth, the first asteroid struck the Pacific Ocean. The impact sent a wall of water 3 miles high racing toward every coastline. The shockwaves circled the planet in minutes. Grace looked up at the sky one last time. She held her mother's hand tightly. She was not afraid. Above her, the sky was full of fire, and somewhere far beyond that fire, humanity's final words were just beginning their long journey home. 70 years had passed since Earth went silent. The Galactic Council had moved on to other matters. New species had been discovered, evaluated, accepted, or rejected. Old conflicts had been settled. New alliances had formed. The small blue planet in the Sol system was rarely mentioned anymore. When it was, the older council members simply nodded and said that some problems solved themselves. Ambassador Al was very old now. His gray skin had grown thin and spotted. His 4 eyes moved more slowly than they once did. He spent most of his days in his private chambers, reviewing old records and thinking about the decisions he had made over his long career. He did not think about Earth often. He had convinced himself years ago that denying humanity was the right choice. They were violent. They were dangerous. The galaxy was safer without them. Then the message arrived from the research vessel, Endless Discovery. Junior scientists had been assigned to survey the outer planets of abandoned solar systems. It was boring work, the kind given to young researchers who had not yet proven themselves. She had cataloged dozens of dead moons and frozen rocks without finding anything interesting. But Titan was different. Her instruments detected unusual energy signatures coming from beneath the surface. She requested permission to investigate. Her captain, a tired old named Al, almost said no. Almost told her it was probably just residual radiation from the asteroids that had destroyed the third planet. Almost turned the ship around and moved on to the next system. But something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was the strange regularity of the energy patterns. Perhaps it was simple curiosity. Whatever the reason, he gave a permission to land. She found the entrance 30 meters below the frozen surface. It was massive, clearly artificial, built to be noticed by anyone who looked closely. The door was marked with symbols she did not recognize, but something about their arrangement felt deliberate, mathematical, designed to be understood. Sent the images back to her ship. Al contacted High Command. High Command contacted the Galactic Council. Within days, a fleet of research vessels arrived at Titan. Within weeks, the greatest minds in the galaxy had gathered to study what had been found. The translation system the humans had left worked perfectly. It started with simple shapes and numbers, things that any intelligent species would understand. Then it introduced basic words: up, down, light, dark, life, death. Then more complex ideas. Within a month, the researchers could read the human language as easily as their own. What they found inside the vault changed everything. The first chamber contained medical knowledge, cures for diseases that had plagued galactic civilization, for treatments that were simple, elegant, and effective. The researchers tested them carefully, certain there must be some mistake. There was no mistake. The humans had solved problems that the greatest doctors had struggled with for centuries. The second chamber contained mathematics, theorems and proofs that opened new fields of study, solutions to equations that had been considered unsolvable. One discovery alone allowed engineers to increase faster-than-light travel efficiency by 40%. The third chamber contained art, paintings and sculptures and photographs that captured something difficult to define: beauty, perhaps, or emotion, or truth. Species that had never cried found themselves weeping before canvases painted by human hands. Species that had no concept of music stood frozen as human symphonies played through the speakers. But it was the historical record that brought the council to its knees. The humans had documented everything, not just their achievements but their struggles, not just their victories but their failures. They showed themselves clearly without hiding anything. Yes, they had built weapons. Yes, they had fought wars. Yes, they had damaged their own planet. But they also showed what happened after they learned they would die. The records showed communities coming together to help each other. They showed scientists sharing knowledge freely. They showed artists creating masterpieces they knew they would never see displayed. They showed parents teaching children who would never grow old. They showed doctors caring for patients they could not save. They showed teachers writing letters to students who would never read them. They showed a species that had faced extinction with dignity, grace, and love. Ambassador Al watched the recordings in his private chamber. He watched Amy Collins announce the asteroid threat to a frightened world. He watched that same world transform its fear into purpose. He watched humans build the vault, not to preserve themselves, but to leave a gift for a galaxy that had abandoned them. And he watched the final message. Amy Collins' face appeared on his screen, old and tired but still strong. Her words were the same ones that had been broadcast 70 years ago, racing across the galaxy at the speed of light. But Al had never heard them before. No one in the council had. They had not been listening. Remember us not as the species you feared. Remember us as the species you never truly knew. Al felt something he had not felt in centuries. Shame. Deep, burning shame that spread through his body like fire. He had led the vote to deny humanity. He had called them dangerous. He had convinced 1,000 species that the humans were better left alone to destroy themselves. And the humans had known. They had known exactly what he thought of them. And still they had built this vault. Still they had filled it with gifts. Still they had spoken their final words without anger or hatred. I entered his chamber hesitantly. She was young, barely past her first century. She had never met a human. She had only known them through the records she had discovered. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "we could have saved them. The technology existed. The resources existed. We could have diverted the asteroids. We could have evacuated the population. We could have done something." Al did not respond. There was nothing to say. Why did we not help them? The old ambassador looked at the young scientist. He searched for an answer that would make sense, that would justify the decision he had made so long ago. He found nothing. "Because we were afraid," he finally admitted. "We were afraid of what they might become. We never considered what they already were." I stood silently for a moment. Then she said something that Al would remember for the rest of his very long life. "They knew we would find this place someday. They knew we would see what we did. They could have filled these halls with accusations and condemnations. They could have made us feel our guilt in every room." She gestured toward the vault's countless chambers, filled with humanity's gifts. "Instead, they gave us everything. They gave us medicine and mathematics and music. They gave us their children's drawings and their grandparents' stories. They gave us the best of themselves, freely and without conditions." Her four eyes met his four eyes. "Ambassador, what kind of species does that?" Al had no answer, but he knew, with terrible certainty, that he would spend the rest of his life trying to find one. The trial of silence began on the first day of the new galactic year. Every species in the council sent representatives. Every screen in every home on every world showed the proceedings. Billions of beings watched as their leaders were held accountable for something that had happened before most of them were born. The Great Hall looked the same as it always had. The floating platform still held representatives from 1,000 worlds. The lights still shone down from impossible heights, but the mood was different now. The arrogance that had filled this space for centuries was gone, replaced by something heavier and harder to name. Ambassador Al stood at the central platform. He was not on trial. He was there to testify, to explain, to answer for a decision that had condemned 8 billion lives to extinction. The chief adjudicator was a being of pure energy named, ancient beyond measure and respected by all species. His voice filled the chamber without sound, speaking directly to every mind present. "Ambassador Al of the 70 years ago, you led the vote to deny membership to the species known as humanity. You supported the quarantine of their solar system. You advocated against providing any assistance. What do you say in your defense?" Al had prepared no speech. He had spent weeks trying to write one and had failed every time. The words he had used to justify his actions seemed hollow now. The arguments that had once seemed so reasonable now felt like lies. "I have no defense," he said simply. "I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the assembly. No council member had ever admitted fault so directly. "I believed the humans were dangerous," Al continued. "I believed their violence would spread to other worlds. I believed the galaxy was safer without them. I convinced myself that ignoring them was wisdom, not cruelty." He paused, his old eyes looking out at the countless faces watching him. "I was a coward. I let my fear guide my judgment. And because of my fear, because of our collective fear, an entire species died alone." The evidence was presented next. The vault's contents had been cataloged and organized. Representatives from dozens of worlds about what they had found there. A doctor explained how human medical knowledge had already saved millions of lives across the galaxy. A plague that had killed entire civilizations for 10,000 years could now be cured with a simple treatment the humans had developed. A mathematician from the crystalline species demonstrated how human theorems had unlocked new forms of space travel. Journeys that once took years now took weeks. An artist from a species that had never known creativity stood before a human painting and wept. She could not explain why. She only knew that looking at it made her feel something she had never felt before. And then they played the testimonies. The humans had recorded thousands of personal messages for whoever might find the vault. Not speeches from leaders or scientists, but words from ordinary people. Teachers and doctors and farmers and children, each one speaking directly to the unknown beings who would one day listen. Ben, the teacher, appeared on the screen. He sat at his desk, surrounded by the empty chairs of students who were already gone. "I hope whoever finds this knows that we taught our children to be kind," he said. "We taught them to share and to help and to love. Even at the end, we did not stop teaching, because that is what humans do. We pass on what matters to those who come after us." Sophie Lane, the doctor, spoke from her hospital room. Patients slept in beds behind her. "I stayed because they needed me," she said simply. "I could not cure them, I could not save them, but I could be there. I could hold their hands and tell them they were not alone. That is what doctors do. We do not abandon our patients no matter what." And then Grace appeared on the screen. The 8-year-old girl with red hair and freckles and a gap in her teeth. She sat on her porch with her mother's arm around her shoulders. Her voice was high and clear. "My mom says you are not bad," she said. "She says you are just scared. I think she is right. I get scared sometimes too, but then my mom hugs me and I feel better." She smiled at the camera. "I hope someone hugs you too. I hope you are not scared anymore." The chamber fell silent. The silence stretched on for a long time. When it finally broke, it was broken by weeping. Spoke again, and every mind felt the weight of the words. "The Galactic Council was created to protect life in all its forms. We have failed in this purpose. The humans asked for help and we turned away. They faced extinction alone because we decided they were not worthy of our concern. This failure cannot be undone. The dead cannot be brought back, but we can ensure that this never happens again." The verdict was unanimous. New laws were passed that day. No species would ever again be assistants in the face of extinction. No quarantine could be imposed without direct evidence of hostile intent. Fear alone would never again be grounds for abandonment. But the changes went beyond laws. The Titan Vault became a pilgrimage site. Beings from across the galaxy traveled there to walk the halls that humans had built. They read the books and listened to the music and studied the art. They learned about Earth and its people, about their struggles and their triumphs, about their failures and their dreams. Schools began teaching human history alongside the histories of other species. Children learned about Amy Collins and Ben and Sophie Lane and Grace. They learned about a species that had been judged unworthy and had responded with generosity. In every library, every museum, every public space throughout the galaxy, a single phrase was inscribed. It was written in the universal language that Foster had created, designed to be understood by any intelligent mind. "We were here, we mattered, and when the darkness came, we chose to leave you light." Al visited the vault one final time before his death. He was very old now, his life measured in final days rather than years. He walked slowly through the chambers he had once believed should never exist. He stopped before a recording of Amy Collins, her image frozen in time. "I am sorry," he whispered to the empty room. "I am so sorry for what we did." The recording could not hear him. Amy Collins had been dead for more than a century, but somehow Al felt that she knew. Somehow he believed that she had always known, even as she recorded her final message, that someday someone would stand where he stood and say what he said. And she had forgiven them anyway. She had chosen to leave light instead of darkness. She had shown the galaxy what humanity could have been, what they were the chance to become. The Council never forgot. They never could. And in their remembering, in their shame and their gratitude and their grief, humanity finally took its place among the stars. Not as citizens of the galaxy, but as teachers to an entire universe, that had so much left to learn.